Good evening. Welcome to the York Parenting Board, April the 28th, 2021. First apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Baker and Councillor Runciman. Item 1 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see anybody. Thank you. Item 2, public participation. We don't have any public speakers. Item 3, minutes. Are there any questions of accuracy or any comments to the minutes, anybody?
Chair, sorry, I'm putting my hand up. I shouldn't use my virtual hand. Can I just ask one thing, if that's all right? On page 3, under 35, the last sentence there, in answer to members' questions, advised that she could provide members with data on the children out of area and placed in a temporary bridging placements outside of York. I know that I'm like a broken record on children that are out of York. I can't remember where we are on that. Amanda or Sophie, did we get an update on that, or is there an update so that we can know on that?
Fiona, is that in terms of children placed outside of here?
Yeah,
outside of York. Yeah,
the last sentence where it said that it could be provided, that data.
It can be provided. Fiona, apologies. I'll make sure that you get that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Anything else, anybody? Amanda?
Yeah, just to be really clear on when children are placed outside of York, because the vast majority of children that we have that are placed outside of York are placed with extended family members. So what kind of breakdown would you want as a board in terms of those children that are placed? Because just the number that are placed outside gives you one bit of information, but the number that are placed outside and the nature of the placements that they're in might be more useful.
Yeah, that's it basically. Yes, thank you.
Anything else, anybody? Thank you. We're all agreed with the minutes then. No objections to any on the minutes. Right. I can't see that Janie's arrived. So if
Chair, she's just going to be with us in a second. She's just been delayed. She's just sent me a WhatsApp, so she's on her way.
Right. In that case, we'll move on to item 5, which is the virtual school head teacher report. Karen, are you there?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am here. I was just sharing with Lawrence that I am having some connectivity issues, so I hope you can hear me.
That's fine at the moment.
Lovely. So I would like to present the annual report to the Corporate Parenting Board for the academic year 2019-20, an unprecedented year of challenge for everyone, not least the virtual school. And so I thought what I would do, if it's helpful, is just sort of move section by section and pause for any questions or comments around each of those sections, if that's helpful to you. So the first few pages, the context of the virtual school, and particularly once we got into March 2020, the activity from March to July, and our response to the COVID pandemic in terms of how we supported schools and carers and social workers. So the first few pages there are around the key areas of work of a virtual school, and also the update for you around what happened from March onwards. Does anybody want to ask anything particular about any of the contents of those first few pages there?
I can't see any hands, Karen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orrell. So moving on then, I have listed and bulleted for you some of the self-evaluation strengths of the virtual school. As many of you know, I was appointed substantively in post in September 2018. In September 2020, that contract was made full-time from 3 days a week. So I have been able to devote, all of my attention to developing practice and processes, strengthening partnerships with our social worker colleagues and with schools, and that has also dovetailed quite neatly into the improvement journey for children's social care, where you know, more children have become accommodated, the virtual school role, number of children on roll has grown, and the age range of the children that we are now tracking their education has also grown significantly. When I took over in post, we really were focusing just on statutory school age children. We now have 3 clearly defined cohorts of children 0 to 5 in the early years foundation stage, who, as soon as they start in a nursery setting, we are instigating a PEP for them, an education plan, as the Care Act defines, for looked after children, but also our post-16 education plans for children after the end of year 11 were quite patchy in practice, and we now have a full role of children from 12 months where applicable, but certainly from the term after they turn 2 years old right up to the end of the academic year, year 13, regardless of whether children turn 18 during that year. The PEP used to cease at 18 if there was one, but we now have an agreement with the pathway team to continue that plan so that we can support transition into higher education if we need to for our care leavers. You know, key highlights are the development of those systems. Really proud of that, actually. And I think that is now a strength in practice, and it's certainly made a big difference to how we can monitor. The introduction and the embeddedness of the welfare call contract for attendance monitoring has meant we've got much richer information and data around attendance exclusion for us. I'll just pause around the strengths there, and then you can also see what the challenges are for us in the virtual school.
Councillor Heaton, you had.
And I'm scrolling between screens to see whether any of you are indicating you want to speak with your hands up, but also looking at my report on screen.
I've got Councillor Heaton.
So I appreciate you helping me out, Councillor Orrell.
Thanks very much. Yeah, just looking at the strengths.
If there are no questions or comments on the strengths and challenges that we face, one thing that's new for those of you who've been in the corporate parenting board group before.
Karen.
Yep.
Councillor Heaton has a question, and then Councillor.
Have I gone, or am I still here?
Can you hear me, Karen?
You're still there, I think. Can you hear me, Karen?
Yes, of course. Councillor Heaton?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Hi there. Good stuff. I think you may be on a bit of a delay. We'll proceed. Yeah, I was just looking at the element of being no permanent exclusions for young people in care in recent years. Obviously, there's collaborative issues there, and you know it's positive. I mean, could you sort of go into a bit more detail of the work that's been going on to ensure that's the case? I mean, what numbers are we talking about as well?
Hello, Karen.
So in terms of our exclusion data, hello.
Yes,
sorry, I am struggling to hear questions, but that was one about exclusions, wasn't it? It's around less than 5% of our population of children in care have received fixed term exclusions, and we do respond very swiftly to any exclusion. We've had no permanent exclusions of any children in care for a number of years. And we're working very hard with our schools to help them to put in more reasonable adjustments and to try and stop that from being the sanction that they resort to, because our children do feel that sense of rejection and a sense of shame when they are rejected. And actually, data shows us that repeated exclusions don't actually improve behaviour, so it's an ineffective sanction. But it will be an ongoing challenge, and is an ongoing challenge for virtual schools across the country, working with schools to adopt more trauma-informed approaches to their behaviour policies.
So what's some of the on-the-ground work that's going into that, Karen, in terms of, ensuring that's not happening?
So we have a learning and wellbeing worker who has a background in fostering and in children's services, and has a lot of training on trauma and attachment seeking behaviours. So any exclusion that happens, she is deployed to that school to unpick what happens, what the responses were from the staff, what training the staff might need, and what alternatives in terms of a package of support around that child can be put in place. We're collecting evidence and case studies of the effectiveness of her work. Ultimately, unfortunately, the Secretary of State for Education and the department published their very clear guidance that schools have the power to exclude, and that they should have discipline policies in place. And they've even changed their wording. Instead of fixed term exclusion, they are now calling them expulsions again. So we are battling against a department where one piece of advice says emotional well-being, social and emotional mental health support, trauma-informed practice should be happening, and on the other side we've got discipline, behaviour, schools should be able to exclude.
And you said their staff are getting
challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You said their staff are getting training and support for this as well, to help them help the students.
It's whether the schools will let us in and focus on releasing staff to have training on working with our most vulnerable children, rather than training on improving outcomes in the classroom for the majority. We prioritise it, of course we do, and that's why the virtual school head is in post to promote and advocate for those children, and our school system needs to catch up with that. And I'm not just talking in York, because we have children in schools across the country. It is a national challenge.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
That was the question I was going to ask. So thank you. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Sorry, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to say thank you for the report. I think the report is very informative. I want to state at the outset, just for transparency purposes, it's not an interest at all, but I have worked with Karen previously when I was an advisor in the East Riding, and I used to monitor the virtual school in the East Riding as well. So I know Karen's background before she came to York. Having said that, on page 18, I would just like to say that second bullet point there, I'd just like to praise you for that, because I think that you're doing all of that work. You're overseeing, 200 PEPs every term. I mean, the whole amount of work. Who could have possibly known how important the virtual school was going to become, really? I mean, it's a kind of a model that is almost built for something like a pandemic, isn't it, really? Although, of course, we're just talking about looked after children here. So well done at the outset on that. I suppose what I'd like to ask you, going on page 17, looking at the bullet points, the self-evaluation points there, really, the second to last one about Key Stage 2 outcomes and progress continue to be an issue. I mean, I know that's across the piece generally on Key Stage 2, but clearly if those outcomes and progress, if that's not right, it's very hard to make the transition to secondary, isn't it? And the worker that you're referring to, that you talked about in answer to Councillor Heaton's question, would they be working there on kind of transition plans? I know it depends on a permanent placement, and assuming that the placement is permanent and that we know where the secondary school might be, work on transition for those Key Stage 2 pupils up to secondary is in hand, is it? Would you like to say something a bit about that?
Of course, Councillor Fitzpatrick, and thank you for raising that. One of the key strengths of our new system for the electronic PEP, which is inside a secure cloud-based system, is that as soon as secondary allocations are made, and indeed as soon as school starting places for reception classes are made in March and April every year, I can allocate the receiving school to access the PEP, so that they can see the history of the child, the progress they're making, and the support that's in place. And this is this year coming, not last year because of the pandemic. This will be the real tried and tested beauty of that system, so that the secondary colleagues can be invited to the PEP. They can interrogate the information and make links with the social worker and the foster carers. And so I think that sits us beautifully into an opportunity to make sure that transition is better. So we can have the conversations from now onwards, from April onwards, leading up to September, and make sure that the right support is in place for children starting secondary school. As you know, there are no Key Stage 2 SATs again this year. There is already an agreement in place locally in York around transition assessments between primary schools and secondary schools, that was agreed at the YSAB board. We'll maximise on that and make sure that the virtual schools involved in the conversations for our looked after children who are moving into secondary in September. I was in a meeting this afternoon about one already, and we'll have another couple of meetings before that, before we actually get into the new term. So looking forensically at Key Stage 2 progress, and over the last 4 years, it hasn't been good enough. I think some of the changes that we've started to make, we will see come to fruition in the next couple of years. It's a bit like turning a tank around. We've got some hearts and minds to shift. We've got some tightening up of the challenge to our primary schools around what they should be doing for our looked after children while they are in Key Stage 2. And we also have to get our secondary schools on board so that they absolutely have a blended and bespoke package for our children as they move into secondary education.
Thank you. And can I, Chair, just one last thing really, to a kind of comment, and maybe you might want to say something, Karen, in answer to something that Councillor Heaton raised about exclusions of children who are looked after. Just wearing a different hat, an Ofsted hat, not that I've done it for a number of years now, but it would always be an absolute red flag when you visited a school if you knew that they had excluded a looked after child. I mean, it was absolutely, you know, any school with any sense really would avoid that at all costs and would make sure that they would work with somebody like you and all the support possible, because it's just not something that was, well, it's frowned upon right across the piece. Do you think that's still the case?
I absolutely do, Councillor Fitzpatrick, and in each of those individual cases, conversations happen with those schools. They really are a last resort. I know every single one and all the circumstances. We still have some way to go in that schools exclude because there's an incident that happens. The virtual school gets involved, and what the guidance says is if a pupil is at risk, then we need to be preemptive, and we're not quite there yet. So I would hope to be able to come back to the Corporate Parenting Board and say we haven't had any fixed term exclusions as a result of our preventative work, but year on year exclusions are coming down because of the challenge that we're putting into the schools and because of the work that we're doing to build a more inclusive system.
Good, thank you.
All right, Councillor Fitzpatrick, any further? Sophie was trying to come in, but she keeps...
No, yes, apologies, Councillor Orrell. family just walked in the door. So but I just wanted to add that Karen routinely comes to our senior management team meeting to sort of, which I think is a real progress for us in terms of the connection, bringing information about individual children, and also obviously we monitor the data around school attendance. Karen presents a good update for us and has attended, for example, our extended senior manager, our senior our team managers meetings as well, to kind of raise awareness. So what we're doing, I think, collectively is bringing a kind of a stronger message, I think, about the importance of looked after children and their education. Really, that kind of feels better, Karen, in that respect. Not more joined up, I think, than ever.
Absolutely, and I made some reference to that in the collaborative working element of the report. It's streets ahead of where we were 3 years ago. So you know, I think the only way is up in that sense.
Yeah, and I think it's having an impact, and I think collectively we can bring challenge to, for example, schools if they're talking about exclusion, or, for example, even carers around the importance of making sure children do attend school, which again is and has been really important during COVID as well.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I can't see any other hands indicating to speak, so thank you very much for the report, Karen, and thank you for all the work that you're doing within your role. It's obviously very important and becoming.
I do apologise, I've lost audio again, a bit of screen freezing.
But thank you, Karen, anyway.
So am I back on? Are you able to hear me?
We are. Did you?
Lovely. So I just lost Sophie at that point and had a bit of screen freezing, but I am back on. So I wanted to share with you all that those of you who have been you know, in the corporate parenting board over a number of years won't have seen the detail of the cohort summaries, and I've been able to do this because of the richness of the data now. So I thought it would be useful for you, just alluding to the comments you made before about where are the children, and also the, you know, if I were a head teacher in a real school, this would be the sort of contextual information I would be sharing with governors around the gender split, the key stage numbers, and you know, where children are in their classrooms, if you like. So you can see that, you know, 68% of our children are in York schools, which is great. And even those, as Amanda alluded to, 52 children in other local authority schools. Many of them are very close to York. They're in North Yorkshire with connected family members, but without the size of our local authority. They're classed as other local authority schools, but they're not that far away. And school type as well, the vast majority of children are in mainstream. It's a very small number of children who are in alternative provision or special schools or independent schools, non-maintained, because of their high levels of need. But what is interesting, I hope, to all of you is, you know, that 55% of the cohort have an identified special educational need, whether that's school support, which is what SENK stands for, or an education, health and care plan, and that number is rising. What's really important to note is that these statistics are for the academic year from September 2019 to July 2020. So if you've had recent updates around and that's just the children in school, around the total number of looked after children, they won't marry up, but these are for that school age population, as I'm sure you can see. There is a little bit about transitions in and out, and that's about the stability of the cohort. And I had a look at other virtual school reports, and that's quite a key factor for virtual schools. What you start with in September isn't what you end with in July, because some children leave care to special guardianship or to return home, and obviously new children are accommodated because of court proceedings or emergency proceedings, or even you know, volunteer proceedings under section 20. But one of the things that I'm sure Councillor Fitzpatrick, it'll resonate with you, is when children move house, move school, it has an impact on their sense of safety in school and at home. And so placement moves and school moves will always be of concern. And there were a lot of children moving and moving within the academic year. So I'll just pause there before we go on to the PEP section and my update, if anybody had any comment or question.
Any comments on that section? No. Move on then, Karen.
I suppose for members of the board there as well, actually, you know, this is the first time I've presented a virtual school head teacher report with this amount of contextual information. Is there anything else that you would like to see in terms of context? But that might be something that you could have a think about and come back to me on. I want this report to be useful to you and to be as informative as possible. So I'll move on to the section on personal education plans. And, you know, absolutely delighted to say that, you know, every single child, bar the 5 siblings who came in last week, have a PEP on the system. One of our challenges and targets is timeliness of the first PEP meeting, but we've got a strategy for that as well. But you know, really proud of the fact that the introduction of the welfare call system and the way that social workers and schools have risen to that challenge has meant that the quality and the quantity of PEPs, you know, it's a massive, vast improvement, and it is thanks to Sophie and her team of senior leaders, you know, as we've just said before, around actually raising that made a big difference. I constantly say to social workers, in your role as parent, you know, I don't say in your role as the allocated worker for this child, you are their parent, be a pushy parent, and it's making a big difference.
Any queries for Karen? Councillor Fitzpatrick?
Yes, just going to the end of the report, if I'm not moving too far forward on it, basically. Looking at you're talking about the clinical commissioning group to make sure that the plans, the health and education plans, can be better supported. What are your views about that? Because clearly that's we haven't got the Your OK board now. I mean, I can't ask questions there. So just wondering how that is, because clearly the whole climate has changed. What do you foresee that as being like, or do you think that, or how is it working? How do you think it might work in the future?
I think one of the biggest challenges we have in York is funding across both health and social care and education. And what strikes me now, 3 years into post, is how the impact of that on our vulnerable children, and to have schools requesting pupil premium, which is for educational outcomes, to pay for therapy, because in their PEP meetings they've had a discussion whereby there's such a long waiting list, or these children won't meet a threshold, or there isn't actually a pathway between the social, emotional, mental health needs that present barriers to learning in a classroom and the high level needs that would access CAMS. There isn't a trauma pathway, an attachment pathway in York, and I think I've had a couple of requests, several in fact, over the last academic year, to fund therapy for children, and asked the regional virtual school heads, does anybody else fund therapy using Pupil Premium Plus? and nobody else does. They all have complex case panels, and we do have a complex case panel in York, but perhaps we just need to work together to embed that and to make sure that our children are discussed, because if we can evidence the need, the commissioners will respond to that, and I'm not convinced we've evidenced the need as clearly as we could have done, and I really could be wrong around that, and there may be other work happening with the clinical commissioning group around that. So I'm working on some case studies and some statistics before I can actually go to, you know, our colleagues in health and say, we've got a problem here, we need to address it together if we can.
Thank you.
I possibly put it in the report because, you know, it is something that's really close to my heart, and I'm constantly getting challenged by schools saying, but no, this child needs therapy, we want an art therapist. And I say, where's the clinical evidence to support that, or is it just a nice idea? And I'm not saying that art therapy would be wrong for a particular child, but we need to be evidence-based. We need to actually have that focus, rather than, you know, schools saying we can't do that, so we think they need therapy, can we buy an art therapist and you pay for it? And I say, well, if they're behind in reading, you need to do some reading interventions and support education first, but the two do go hand in hand. If children aren't feeling safe, settled and ready to learn, they won't make progress. So it is one of those wicked problems that we do have, I think, particularly in our small environment here in York.
Thank you. Is there anything?
Yes, you're right, Councillor Fitzpatrick. I'm quite happy for you to jump ahead. And I don't want to labour the whole report for you, but just wanted to give you that opportunity. So I'll skip through. We've already alluded to working with others, and I put that paragraph in there to show you how much and how far we've come, and the training that we've delivered, and then from our self-evaluation what those key priorities will be. But the last section of the report is the commentary that goes alongside the appendix you've got, which is the data over the last 4 years. We are in conversation as virtual schools in the region around outcomes, because of course we didn't have national outcomes in 2020, and we won't have national outcomes in 2021 for Key Stage 2 either, because the SATs aren't going ahead. There will be GCSE and A-level grades awarded, but not collected and reported nationally. So we will have 2 years of no national comparisons with how others are doing. So we're working together as a region to come up with a solution for that, so that we can see where we benchmark and what progress we're making.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any more queries to Karen? Is there anything else you want to add, Karen?
Nothing from me. I just thank you all for your support behind the scenes in championing how our children are getting on in school. I think, you know, working with Amanda and Sophie, we know we have things to do across our school system, and plans are in place to do that. And looking forward to another challenging year. Never a dull day.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks again. Thanks for the report. Janie, welcome to the meeting. We're now going back to agenda item 4, which we held back for your arrival. So I think it's Simon who's going to introduce this. Simon's had difficulties with his video, so we will be hearing from him rather than seeing him.
Would it be helpful just to give you, I am so sorry that I'm late. I'm afraid that the meetings that I've been in during today have kind of considerably overrun. Mm-hmm. So I am very sorry about that.
That's fine, Jenny. We understand. Simon.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So this report builds on the report that came to to the board in January around proposals and next steps for how the corporate parenting board could be delivered. You'll see that it does include some research on other local authorities and the approaches they take and what seems to work best, and there's reference to that in the report as well. We already know that young people have told us that they would like stronger links between the corporate parenting board and young people and the groups, and more representation of the corporate parenting board from different agencies and services. There's been a further consultation with them in March of this year, and they've told us that they would like representatives from the Children in Care Council and the Care Leavers Forum to be members of the corporate parenting board. And you'll see there on page 2 that there are 7 key points there that they raise. So, for instance, the right support and training to enable them to fully participate, decision makers to take their roles seriously, and giving young people the opportunity to speak up within meetings, being mindful that some young people will be more confident than others. I'm not going to go into any detail around the purpose of the corporate parenting board. I mean, you clearly know that, and that was also referenced last time as well. So in terms of the membership of the board, it's proposed that the board would be co-chaired by a representative of Show Me That I Matter and I Still Matter and an elected member. The co-chair could be nominated at the first meeting of each year. And it's also proposed that the board would consist of up to 4 representatives from Show Me That I Matter and I Still Matter, and a maximum of 4 elected members. And you can see where it's suggested that they are drawn from as well. And the board will also have the power to co-opt non-voting members to give advice. And clearly there is a kind of list in respect of the potential co-opted members of the board. The revised membership would mean a reduction in the number of elected members sitting on the board. But then I think we can argue that young people would be able to join the membership along with representatives from partner agencies, and that direct contribution from young people would be really powerful. And I think you could argue that would provide more scrutiny and challenge from young people who have the direct experiences of the services that the council provides. In relation to the meetings of the board, it's proposed that there would be a new format, and it would be divided into 2 parts. The first part would be young person led and would be a topic of their choice, and perhaps would be a piece of work that they've been working on, and within that we could kind of look at the findings of that work and any areas of strengths and development. The second part of the meeting would be specifically business focused and would be co-chaired and would relate to, for instance, the specific areas of the corporate parenting and children in care strategy or the work plan of the board. And again, I think crucially there, young people's lived experiences and their direct contribution would feed into the work and inform any actions arising from the board. It's proposed that the meetings would take place in private, so would not be broadcast. Taken together, the board would become less formal. It would be an open forum that would be able to listen and engage young people, as I've said already, kind of really hear their lived experiences and respond to those and comment on those. It's also proposed that the board would come together before each meeting to share some food and drink, and that would build relationships, but would also contribute to the informal nature of the meetings. They'd be more relaxed, more informal. The board would meet on a quarterly basis still. It wouldn't have decision-making powers, and it would not be a formal board committee. There would be an annual report provided by the young person as the co-chair, which would be presented to the meeting of the full council, and that would provide information about the work of the board and its effectiveness as well. And then at the very end, you can see there's reference to next steps and potentially a transition process, reference to training and support for the members of for the young people who would sit on the board. So preparation work with elected member who would co-chair, some development sessions, There would need to be support from the voice service, formal revised terms of reference, and I think crucial at the end, a workshop to be held with members of the board and show me that I matter, to look at how the board could work together and developed, and that Mark Riddell, who is a national lead for care leavers with the DFE, who's also a care leaver himself, would come along to the workshop and talk to us about what he's seeing nationally in terms of what works and also kind of his vision. So very much for the board to for their comments and also the proposed potential next steps. Any questions from people?
Jenny, before I bring other members in, Jenny, could I clarify something in terms of the proposed membership? It's saying 4 elected members. Would that have to be on proportionality?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Political proportionality should never feature, in my experience, in a corporate parenting board. Would it be okay for me to just give you a little bit of my kind of approach towards this strategy as well as the monitoring officer? Is that okay with you, Chair?
That would be very helpful, thank you.
So my professional background is in children's social care for local authorities, representing local authorities for over 20 years in public law Children Act proceedings. So it's care proceedings, adoption, and all sorts of related matters, and predominantly occurring in the High Court. I've also advised on a number of corporate parenting boards over the years, and work very closely with colleagues in children's services and people in Amanda's position. As you know, that I've been undertaking a review of the council's constitution, which will shortly be circulated to members as a working draft for their consideration. I'm very concerned that our current constitution does not have or give the opportunity for real exposure of the importance of corporate parenting as part of being incorporated into our governance framework. I think corporate parenting is a fundamental role for everybody, whether you're an officer or an elected member. And I think we owe it to our young people that we make a public statement and a public commitment to promoting corporate parenting. It is something that I've experienced in other councils where I've worked as well, and it's something that I'm quite a passionate advocate of as well. So I apologise for that now, but I feel I shouldn't need to apologise, if that equally makes sense. I do not believe that corporate parenting meetings should be live streamed because I feel that it's absolutely vitally important that members of this board directly hear the views of the young people that we are responsible for and responsible for their future, their immediate care, their future nurture, their ability to achieve anything that they possibly want to, and to listen to their aspirations. But equally, just as being a parent at home, I think it's really important to listen to their kind of wobbles about things, their noises, their uncertainties, and how we can make life better. So an example of that in my career thus far is when Sky TV became a really big thing and became publicly accessible. It was like a newfangled thing. The council that I worked for at that particular time refused to listen to the fact that its children had the right to access Sky Television, and corporate parenting took that on because your child at home would access Sky Television and a range of appropriate television programs, but we as a parent couldn't facilitate that. So there's real power and strength in corporate parenting boards listening to views of young people so that they have exactly no difference in their upbringing as your children at home or your grandchildren, for example. In order to sort of square the circle so that there is still public awareness of our commitment to corporate parenting, but also maintaining that there's a key involvement. The approach that I would really like to take with the consent of this board is that rather than put a stereotypical corporate parenting board reference in the constitution, it says it looks very boring and it is, we will commit to do this, it's structured with this, it has this is the terms of reference. I feel it's really important to tell the members of the public in our constitution that we have a corporate parenting commitment and that we have a strategy and that you can read about it, and that young people, if they want to read our constitution, Not that I would recommend that, but if they want to read it, they can read in a really easy format just about how you hope to enrich and make their lives better, and how we can give a promise in a very public document on behalf of the council to make their lives better, to help them feel that they can inform and shape the lives that they wish. So with your indulgence, I would like to have a different style of terms of reference, and it is very much incorporated within Simon's report here. Now, obviously, I wouldn't include next steps or anything like that, but what we would do is talk about membership of the board. We would put in, for example, the first few pages of it, which is the narrative, which is a really important detail. We would have included at page 9, 10, membership of the board. The board is perfectly within its rights, once it's met, to review this membership, and I would encourage the board to keep it under constant review, because it has to be fit for purpose to reflect young people's lives and wishes and feelings. I also think that we need to be mindful that we have the appropriate advisors that help members and help young people shape what corporate parenting looks like in York. And interestingly as well, I've come from a background where young people are very much involved in the development of this board and in its implementation, in its blossoming and its growing. So I have had young people who co-chair, because they feel that it's a sense of owning their own lives and being listened to. They've also been involved in decision making. I've also used the young people at Corporate Parenting Board, perhaps in interviews, perhaps getting involved in help design apprenticeships, and they fed back to corporate parenting about how they can make a difference. We've also sort of the extended membership of advisors has also been extended as well, so that, for example, foster carers have a view that the corporate director of people's services can be held account in this meeting as well. Why aren't you delivering this? Why am I not allowed chocolate on Wednesday nights? Everybody else is. Why can't I? Because that is sometimes it's the small things that are big things. And I think it's very much that if we take away a lot of the formality of this, it gives corporate parenting the power to yourselves and working with young people directly to really help and shape and transform what life can be like living in York. And it gives you freedom of decision making as well, and freedom of challenge. From personal experience as well, going through inspection regimes, corporate parenting is heavily viewed in inspection regimes about listening to voices of young people and children, and also engaging yourselves about your responses, what you've heard, etc. I've also worked with Simon and Amanda around the annual report. Personally, I believe that you should be an annual report to full council. Because that is how you capture the audience of all 47 members. That's how you ensure that you're advising them of their responsibilities on corporate parenting. That's how you ensure that, a confident young person can also say, thank you very much, or, it's been great working with you. And they get the chance to be in that environment and being a strong advocate for York as well. So rather than a report from your board going to Children's Scrutiny Committee, with a very limited audience, no disrespect to scrutiny, but it has a very limited audience, I would really like this board to support a recommendation that the annual report goes to full council, where it gets the airing of everybody across York, and it makes corporate parenting everybody's responsibility. So perhaps that's probably too much from me, but I really don't want to apologise about wanting to be a really strong advocate. There are good examples of corporate parenting up and down the country, and if members are interested or you'd like to see other examples, I can certainly email you links to other corporate parenting boards so that you get a flavour of other things that happen. And I just finally want to reassure you that I have worked very closely with Simon and Amanda and Sophie on this. It's not something that I've dreamt up on my own. It's just been a very, very sort of strong collaborative approach to sort of like probably them to control my passion as well. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Don't apologise for being passionate. Amanda, did you want to come in before I bring members in?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Janie said, and I think the fundamental document that we have is our guarantee, our corporate parenting guarantee, which is what we have agreed that we will offer as corporate parents to our young people. It was co-designed with them. It's almost our contract with them. And I think that should be fundamental about what's the basis of corporate parenting board, because for me this board is how well are we as parents in delivering that. And the point that Karen made about, you know, social workers need to see themselves as children's parents. We of course do share parental responsibility for a number of our children with their wider families, but we absolutely do need to see all of our roles as the roles of being the parents of these children, and making sure that we only accept for them what we would accept for children that are our birth children. And that for me is the purpose of this board, is are we doing that, and young people holding us all to account about we could do better.
Thanks, Amanda. Councillor Muston.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of comments and then a point of clarification, if that's all right. The first comment is just to thank everyone for all the work that's been done on this, because, and also the way it's laid out is really useful for us to understand. I think it portrays a really positive direction and ambition for the future of this board that has young people at its heart, which is great. I also totally hear what you're saying about appreciating the need to increase awareness amongst all of the council members about our duties as corporate parents, because there was a fantastic induction that I believe Amanda organised, or was part of when I was first inducted, that I found incredibly useful. I don't know that everyone was in attendance of that, and unfortunately one of the other members did make comments after the session that, you know, they didn't really feel it was their responsibility, which still really bugged me, because the whole session was pointing out to us how important it was that we all consider ourselves to be parents. So anything we can do to increase that more is great. And the one clarification question that I have is regarding the annual report from the co-chair of the board that's being proposed, and potentially this is just an issue of phrasing. But it says this will provide information about the work of the board and its effectiveness, and also how well council services support children in care and care leavers, and how well the council undertakes its corporate parenting responsibilities. And I wondered if this could possibly be rephrased so that it doesn't sound like it's up to the young person to give an update on the council's performance as a corporate parent. So it maybe could be rephrased to say the corporate parenting board's opinion, you know, as young people, as to how the council's performing, rather than giving an update about how well the council supports children in care, because that sounds like a young person being tasked with giving a performance update, which I wouldn't really consider is their duty. But I can understand why that's there and what it means.
Yeah. Amanda?
One of the things that we might want to look at, and we might want to talk to young people about, is in some other authorities that I've worked at, the young people develop their own data set around what they think is good performance. And we would look at that on each of these boards, but that would be the basis on which they'd report back to full council. And that is really interesting, because it might include some of the data that we would ordinarily collect, because things like placement stability are important to everybody. But it also includes some of that softer stuff that, as Janie said, some of those small issues are big issues. You know, do you get chocolate on a Wednesday night? Might be one of the things that young people want to include. So that might be something that we might want to look at, is, you know, is there something that they could develop that is their own set of, this is what good corporate parenting looks like, which is on the back of the guarantee maybe.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Fitzpatrick?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I certainly agree as a way forward. This is the direction we should be going in terms of involving more young people. Having said that, I was quite concerned after the last meeting, and have spent the last 3 months getting my head around all of this. And I have looked online. I've done everything Janie said. Janie knows I've had a formal meeting with her to talk about this as well, because I have been concerned. I wanted to be absolutely sure that all officers were giving the same message. And sadly, I have to say, the fact that it was unclear about tonight about webcamming or not shows that actually that message hadn't got to everybody concerned. So that's a slight moan about that, and that should have been clarified before tonight's meeting, I feel. But as to the way forward, yes, I think it's good that we go down this direction, that we have more young people involved, absolutely. And we might want to look at how Show Me That I Matter actually operates as a separate body if they're going to be more into this. I would always welcome young people being involved. What I would question, though, is where elected members can actually kind of challenge anything or ask questions or whatever. Now, the full council model, I think, is absolutely great to have a young person there if they're prepared to do that, if they want to come along. In fact, I raised it at full council, the fact that all councillors are corporate parents, and that, you know, people do forget. Councillor Musson highlighted what the training was like right at the very beginning. That was great. And there was a very, you know, striking comment made by one member there, I think shocked all of us, about a lack of understanding really about our role as corporate parents. So I think we need ongoing training, all of us, in being a corporate parent. But I wouldn't want it to be this full council move really to take over that kind of second tier of corporate parenting. We're all corporate parents. The middle level that we're at now is this board really, and then going up to Councillor Oral and Amanda. At the top ends, total responsibility. So we don't just want it to end up being window dressing, where you have a young person there presenting something and everybody thinks that's okay. I mean, because A, the full council agenda is very, very busy anyway, and B, it might be at the whim of a Lord Mayor as to how much questioning can be involved there, and how appropriate might it be, or how rigorous could it be for any of us to ask questions there. So that's my only concern about full council, really. Then we might come round to CEC and having a report there, which is fine, absolutely, to do that. But we know at the moment within the Constitution that scrutiny is not operating in the way that it might, and it's being watered down slightly. So it's just, I suppose, other than the exec member, but as we're being told now, it might not necessarily even be the executive member who is the co-chair alongside the young person. You know, I would think maybe it ought to be, but it might not be. It's just any opposition to basically the executive or officers. That we need to be sure that is there, and that the challenge can be there, because I just worry, I'm not being awkward for the sake of being awkward, but obviously there is nothing more important than anything we do anywhere in our role than the safeguarding of young people, and particularly looked after young people. So as long as everything we're proposing doesn't diminish the opportunity for us to ask those kind of questions, is all I would say.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Just, I think on the comment that Councillor Musson made and yourself about involving more all members in the safeguarding aspect. Councillor Webb has approached me about this, and we've discussed with Amanda, and at some point we'll have some sort of briefing for members to attend and ask questions. It's getting it in the diary is the issue, rather than the actual doing of it. So,
Chair, sorry, there was one little last thing that I wanted to just add to what I said. That is that having looked at everything online about all other local authorities and how they operate, and finding it all fascinating, I would like to actually say that I do think Lancashire and the work that goes on there is really very, very impressive. And I know Amanda will like that, because Amanda has often told us about the work in Lancashire, and I know that you might have been involved in it. So I can see that it is a really good example of good practice.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Lots of good things come out of Lancashire. Janie, Amanda, sorry, you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, I just wanted to reassure, really. Yes, I do own a lot of what Lancashire did, because members will know that I was the DCS there prior to moving over here. And corporate parenting is extremely dear to my heart. And for me, the challenge that the corporate parenting panel gave to us as offices in Lancashire was very stringent, because when you do support a group of young people to really have a voice, they have a voice, and they tell you how good the services are, and they don't couch it. So, but so does having partners around the table, and that is what, having foster carers, having special guardianship carers, having that range of people who support our children around the table makes for a very rich conversation, and does make for some meetings where as a statutory officer you are uncomfortable at times, but they should be, because that you should feel challenged in those meetings. I'm sure we could ask some of Lancashire's board to come and talk to us about how they make sure that challenge exists. Councillor Fitzpatrick, if that's an area you want to look at, but I do think that voice of young people, that, as I said, that data set that young people produce, some authorities have young inspector models, so young people go out and visit the kind of placement provision that their peers are part of. There are lots of other ways that you can really get that rigor into that challenge that is a different model of delivery.
So, Chair, I've also practiced in the Northwest for a considerable chunk of my career, so I'm very familiar with Lancashire, and surrounding authorities as well. So I think we've both, Amanda and I both sort of grew up in the same territory, kind of thing. I would just say that to be effective, a corporate parenting board should be a really difficult challenge environment. It's not just the challenge of people like Amanda and myself, statutory officers. It's also a challenge of members and the lead member for children's services. I don't want to put you on the spot, Councillor Orrell, but it should also be a really good challenge of executive members as well, because you are the decision makers. You are the ones that are also the advocates and the mouthpiece as well for them. So, going forward, hope that challenge should be a lot more evident than what it is now. These should be really difficult, interesting, informative, lively, vibrant meetings. Just on the annual report, acutely aware and fully acknowledge the comments that Councillor Fitzpatrick has made about very heavy agendas, running out of time. It's a big event as well, so it could be slightly off-putting. It doesn't mean that scrutiny can't really have a role in this. It doesn't mean that children's scrutiny can't invite the lead member for children's services, the executive member, and say, please just tell us why, please just tell us this. It also doesn't mean that scrutiny can't, if it so wants to, have a period of time with the young person who may be the co-chair of this committee, because if that young person is willing to, we can facilitate that and support that. But likewise, we can also have a task group with members. We can have anything that helps informs and shapes people's views and also holds to account. So it is really, really, how creative do we want to be and how empowering do we want to be as a board, really. And that's why I think it's timely to have a review of the function, the role and responsibility in the terms of reference. And by doing the challenge and showing visible activity in a different way, that's how other members kind of perceive what's going on, and we understand and learn, that it's everybody's business. It's absolutely everybody's business that we get parenting right for our young people, because they are York's future. They really, really are. So I'm very happy to help input some additional challenge, and also as part of the review of the Constitution as well, we can have conversations about ensuring that young people have a voice in the meetings where they should have a voice, and use scrutiny a different way. Scrutiny is subject to fundamental review at the moment. We can obviously add challenge into that, and Councillor Webb is heavily involved in scrutiny. He can help inform and shape a work programme that includes voices of young people, representation from this board. So we can be as creative as we want to be, I think, and Lancashire is a really good exemplar model to follow of where we could be going forward.
Thanks, Jenny. Councillor Heaton and then Councillor Rowley.
Thanks. Just a thought, and Janie sort of touched on a few things there, really. I mean, there's a lot to like in here. I think getting the thoughts of young people and also critically thoughts of partners is going to be really important, and it is going to be that level of scrutiny that comes in a different direction. But as I say, it's critical. I think we have to keep focused on the scrutiny that comes from members as well. Now, how we do that, whether we do that as a task force, whether we have greater focus to CEC as well, whether there's some combined working there. We've had joint scrutiny in the past as well, and as you say, Janie, it's under review. I mean, after this afternoon, I'd say it's probably a bit up in the air at the moment, really, but in terms of how things are going. But I think we do need to maintain that element of member scrutiny as well, where you can really drill down into a topic which I do worry you couldn't do so in full council scenario, or this doesn't seem the setting that would be the kind of thing that would be going on so much.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Again, as the rest of my colleagues have said, there's an awful lot of positives in this report, and I would agree with probably the majority of the report in terms of what's being proposed. My slight concern, probably, I'm echoing Councillor Heaton's comments just now. I am slightly concerned at the reduction of elected members. Whilst I can see that we need to make room for young people and for their representation and for the officers and for other agencies, I do kind of feel that the elected member is elected by the residents of the city, and whilst that doesn't make our role as corporate parents any more important than the officer's role, we are elected by the people to be that voice of reason and scrutiny. So my question would, as a question really, to Louise or to Janie, what was the rationale behind having just a maximum of 4 elected members? Because at the moment there's 8, so we're going to halve that. At this meeting, we've had 2 apologies from elected members. So it's not inconceivable that potentially at a meeting, you may have, maybe only a couple of elected members at any of the board meetings. So that's my only slight concern, and it mustn't in any way take away from the positives that are in this report. And as a whole, I would want to support this report. But it's just my question as to what was the rationale behind it being 4, and how can we address that concern?
That's why I asked about proportionality at the beginning, Councillor Rowley. Is there a comment on why 4?
Right. So from my perspective, the lead member is absolutely a key, has to be sort of like a mandatory member, because ultimate decision maker, there is a legal responsibility as well, and works in collaboration with the statutory officer. It's Amanda. So it has to absolutely be here. The others are directly involved in show me I matter, etc. And there are a number of issues. If you get too many members, the environment becomes too outfacing for some young people, and so therefore the balance of power tips very much we're back into an adult style forum as rather than a safe space for young people to confidently air a view. There is a perception as well that young people, if this is really their meeting and it's about how they are parented, then they need to be, as a perception that they need to be empowered, that they need to have something that they can feel that they can positively influence. So there is that as well. The other issue is really about sharing people's lives. How many, you get 8 or 10 members on here. If you're a young person sharing the kind of really private details of what it's like to be parented by a local authority, do you really want to expose part of your private life to a number of people that you kind of never meet? So they have close, trusted relationships with people like a social worker, like someone in the community, like Amanda, for example. They could have a really good, positive dialogue with Amanda or Sophie, or someone at school or college, but would you really feel confident sharing details about how we can improve your private life in front of a huge number of adults? And I think that's part of, if we put a mirror up to ourselves, would we feel confident sharing something around, I don't know, instances that I've had experience in the past is provision of toiletries, provision of safe space, provision of, why do I always have to follow a healthy eating diet just because the council says so? All of my friends eat chocolate. Why do I have to wear a non-designer t-shirt just because it's a local authority? These are really tiny things that I've experienced in my career. But actually, if you're a younger person, they are the most important to help you fit into an environment where there may be an inappropriate stigma, there may be some sort of issue, something that they want to share. But also, if they're in our care as well, they've got to feel confident enough to share that experience and say, well, actually, I really didn't like that. I really didn't like how the review was conducted. And these are very private things. And so we're trying to be respectful of ensuring that our young people still have a degree of integrity and control over their private lives, but equally challenge about how you can influence that to improve it. So that is my rationale from my perspective. I'm clearly willing to listen to views, obviously, and it's ultimately a decision of full council, because if I would like this into the constitution. But that is my view. Amanda and Sophie may have different experiences from their practice, but those are the sort of experiences that I've had of challenge and conversation in a corporate parenting board meeting, Chair.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair, and Janie, thank you again for that very full answer. I guess, you know, what I would say as a member of the Corporate Parenting Board, of all the committees and bodies that I sit on, for me, this is something that really strikes to the core of what I want to be and what I believe. So I don't just want to be a member sat around a table. I want to have a real understanding in these young people's lives. I want to make a difference to these young people. And I want to hear the stories. I want to be able to sit around a table with somebody and find out, you know, why they can't wear a designer t-shirt or why they can't have chocolate on a Wednesday. For me, it is really important that I'm not just a chair filler. For me on this committee or this board, you know, my role for me personally is probably more important than many of the other boards that I sit on. So I think it's probably more about how the member perceives their role in this board rather than the number of members. But I think that for me, just personally, to just have 4, 2 of them are effectively the statutory members because of their role, doesn't leave much scope for the other 45 elected members to have their say and to get involved if they so wish. So that was just my comment. But thank you, Janie, for your answer.
Councillor Hunter, then I'll bring you in, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. I think mine really is sort of encompassing what all the other councillors have commented on. I mean, I take on board what Councillor Rowley has just said there, but also what Janie said. I mean, I think we need far more training, and I think we need to make all our elected members aware of that we are corporate parents, each and every one of us, not just the people that's on the board. And I think seeing this today, knowing that the children are wanting to get more involved, it really sort of hits home to me that we do need to look after our children, and they need to be in an environment like our own families would be. And where we're putting down here that there would, on the board meeting, to have a little get together 30 to 40 minutes before with sandwiches and something like that, I think that's a fantastic move. But would that environment be in more of a social building, not actually say in West offices? You know, children want to meet in a nice, I don't know, say a sports centre or something, so they're not stigmatised again by going into like a council office. So it's just more of a comment like that, really, so that they do feel as though they're part of our young society, really. And I think we do really need to listen a lot more than what we actually do. I mean, I know it's going back quite a few years ago now. They did like a little bake-off, and that was held in West offices. And I think a lot of councillors were invited, but I have to say, not many turned up. I mean, I did a bit of baking myself. It was pretty rubbish, but I think more members need to actually listen to our young people. So it was just a comment that I think we need more little social events to engage with more of our members as well, to bring them along. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Hunter. Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, the issue of where do you meet is a really, really interesting one, because I'm with you, Councillor Hunter. I would always assume that you'd meet somewhere that was less formal. However, when I've worked in other authorities, one of the things that was really important to young people was that they met in the formal council building, because they wanted it to be a proper meeting.
Yeah.
And so you know, I think we need to have that conversation. I think you're right about the kind of wider everybody a corporate parent, and there's something in this for me about almost how do we relaunch the guarantee? How do we relaunch the work that we're all doing as corporate parents, and think about, you know, do we do another session like the session that we did when the new administration came in and you all took over, and we think about how we kind of do more of that. One of the things that does happen in other authorities is that as part of the corporate parenting strategy, they then have a number of work streams that sit underneath that. So, you know, that might be something around supported employment opportunities for our children. And those work streams sometimes have a member champion. So, you know, if a member's got a particular interest or particularly good contacts in a business community, for example, then they might be part of that work stream. So that might be something that we could think about. How do we do that as part of a wider everybody a corporate parent type approach?
Any other comments, anybody, or feedback into that? Well, we have a recommendation to note it, and how are we going to move this forward, Janie?
Councillor Aurora, I think Nikki's trying to come in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nikki.
No, that's fine.
I'm looking for blue hands, not.
Sorry. No, it was just really to echo what the point that Amanda's made, really, with regards to the location of meetings. I think sort of if we were to ask young people, we would probably get a bit of a mixed view, with some preferring more sort of relaxed and informal spaces, but certainly members of our Show Me That I Matter panel and I Still Matter panel, believe it or not, are really eager to come back into West offices after the pandemic. So I think that just echoing your point, Amanda, about, I think there is something about, well, where do the other council meetings take place, and to sort of just put it on the same scale, really.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Janie, how do we move this forward? Everybody seems to be in agreement with the way things are being proposed.
So, Chair, I just need to alter the wording around the annual report element that Councillor Musson has brought to our attention. If it's acceptable to the committee, what I will do is provide an updated version, which is kind of constitution compliant, so it doesn't need next steps or anything like that, but it's tailored as to how it would look in the revised draft constitution that you will see. I'm very happy to circulate that either to all members of here or to yourself and the chair for just kind of final approval. It's very much up to you. And then the next time that you see that, once you've approved it, it will be in the draft constitution. And then obviously there's time for further debate around it at a future meeting of Audit and Governance Committee, which is yet to be arranged, and also a future meeting of full council yet to be arranged, which will consider the entirety of the constitution. I'm quite happy to put in some wording as well around a commitment to ensure that this remains fit for purpose, and also a commitment that membership can be reviewed, you know, in a timely manner as and when required to. For example, if an agency comes forward and wants to be part of it, or, you know, there's in-year changes. So I'm quite happy to put a bit of wording in around that, if that helps, and probably just make reference to scrutiny in acknowledgement of Councillor Fitzpatrick's comments. So scrutiny is not ruled out as a possibility, but, you know, it's another avenue of challenge, and is an acknowledge that exists. So I'm quite happy to do that.
Yeah, happy for it to go to all members of the board, if you can do that. Councillor Fitzpatrick?
Actually, I was more or less going to say that. I think also, to go back to what Councillor Rowley was saying earlier about the specific interest in this, and this being a really important meeting and committee to be on. I think all of us really, you know, in our own ways, within our own areas, when we choose committees to be on, there is a certain, you know, element of choosing what you want to do. So everybody who is on here has chosen to be on here because they're all interested in young people and they're all interested in doing it. So I would just agree with what you'd said, Chair, that I think if it could be circulated to everybody here to do, you know, to have a say on, would be great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Janie, for coming to the meeting this evening. If we can move on to Item 6, the sufficiency strategy. Simon, it's you again.
Sorry, I was on mute. Apologies.
That's okay.
So this is our sufficiency strategy 2020 to 2023. We have a duty to provide and procure placements for children and young people in care in the regulations, and we have a requirement to produce a strategy. We have to have a sufficiency strategy, and that also includes a requirement for us to work with key partners to be in a position to secure sufficient accommodation for our children and young people in care. And it goes beyond the number of beds to actually providing a range of services and through different providers. And that also includes, for instance, children on the edge of care, so how we can prevent children from coming to care as well. You'll see at the bottom of page 1, there are 6 key objectives, which I'll say a little bit more about as I go through. The strategy was presented to the executive member decision session on the 29th of September last year. So this strategy reflects data up to the 30th of March 2020. So it's not the current data, it reflects March last year, and it was, as I say, it went to the executive member decision session at the end of September. When we wrote the strategy, it was very much coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic, so we've kept it under review, particularly around our foster care recruitment campaign and also the residential strategy. I'll say a bit more about those shortly. In terms of the background, most children in York are brought up in their own families, but a small number of children do become looked after. When they become looked after, then the first thing we look to do is to keep children within their families where that's safe to do so, and also to keep them local as well, if that's possible. And we recognise that it's really important that children and young people understand what's happening to them in terms of their care. So we really don't separate them from their siblings unless it's absolutely imperative to do so. They have a say in their placement. They visit a placement before they're placed. That we listen to, act upon what they're telling us in terms of their experiences of being in care, and that we don't disrupt children in years 10 and 11 because it's so vital for their education. So the current position, as I said, it does reflect March 2020. Just briefly, historically York's had low numbers of children and young people in care. We have seen an increase in 2019 and 20, and that was very much the recalibration, the safeguarding service. Previously, we had children, low numbers of children in pre-proceedings, subject to child protection plans and repeat plans for too long. And we identified this cohort of children who actually we needed to issue care proceedings on, and they've come into care. So we have seen that increase, but they were the right children to come into care, and that's been confirmed through external peer review. I think crucially now we are issuing far fewer care proceedings. We have a far more robust pre-proceedings process where we're working with families at that stage just before care proceedings to say, look, this is your last chance to kind of work with us. So that's a much improved process. We are seeing not issuing on as many children as care, which is positive. As I say, we got through that bulge, those children who needed to come into care, and we worked through those. We do have some unique challenges when it comes to recruiting foster carers because of the student homestay market, house prices being high as well. So there are some particular challenges in trying to recruit and develop our sufficiency in York. So the first objective, and there's information there about the profile of the City of York children. But as I say, that was at March 2020. We are in the process of updating that, but just for some key kind of headlines there, we're seeing a decline in the number of 10 to 15-year-olds in care, and we've seen an increase in the number of 1 to 4-year-olds coming into care. And I think that reflects really that recalibration, the safeguarding service, where we've been intervening in children much younger rather than being on plans for a number of years or a number of months and then actually you know, they become also relatively earlier in that sense, which is a real positive. It kind of shows that we've been doing the right things, really. And actually, 1/4 of our children and young people in care are aged 15 to 17, and that's still the case. We've got high numbers of 15 to 17-year-olds. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we still see a large cohort of children leave care by virtue of reaching 18. In terms of our foster carer households, we have 123 approved foster carer households now, but we have seen a number of connected carers go up from 28.9% to 38%. We are still approving more connected carers, so family and relatives for children in care, rather than recruiting more mainstream carers. I'll say a bit more shortly about our foster care recruitment strategy. So then just briefly around our objectives. So the first one being children and young people will be supported to stay with their families where it's safe to do so. That very much reflects the early help strategy and the importance of identifying children who benefit from early help, undertaking assessments, and then providing that targeted early help service. And that's not about referring into a local area team to do that work. It's actually about our partners, and on a multi-agency basis, that work being undertaken at source, rather than, okay, you know, I work in the school or I work in health, I'm going to refer into a local area team for them to do that. No, they should do that as the lead professional. So that's a key part of the strategy, the early help strategy. We've actually completed the adolescent strategy, and I think that's something that we could bring to the board to kind of see actually. So that's been that's another kind of key part of children remaining within their families where that's possible to do so. And also we're developing a strengths-based social work practice model, and again that's something I think that we should bring to the corporate parenting board, so you can see what that means in terms of the way that we work with families, particularly around the kind of strengths within families, that whole system, rather than on an individual basis. And we also have a really good immediate response and end of care team for children who are close to, so families that are close to breakdown, and children on the kind of cusp of coming into care, and families needing intensive family support. So that's a real positive. We're going to, you'll see the strategy talks about increasing our family group confidence, the work with families to help them kind of come up with their own solutions to kind of problems within their families. And then the second objective is around achieving permanence in a timely manner through adoption and special guardianship. The key work we've been doing there is around our permanence policy and improving social work understanding of permanence. And actually, another part of that kind of strategy is around the early identification and timeliness of children adopted from care. This last financial year, we saw 4 children adopted, and you know, traditionally it tends to be around about 10 children. So I think that needs to be understood in the context of COVID. We've seen in care proceedings cases that where those proceedings are contested, which is sometimes the case, and when adoption is being considered, that those hearings have been put back. So that is impacting on our timeliness and why we've only had 4 children adopted this last financial year. So as I say, that's impacted by COVID in particular. And also in terms of special guardianship, we're in the process of developing our offer so that we can have more children subject to a special guardianship order, rather than become looked after and being placed in the connected placements. But it's much better if those children can achieve permanence through special guardianship rather than through being in care. And we're also actively seeking to discharge care orders as well. So that's another key part of our strategy. In terms of objective 3, more children living in a local placement, and the key activity there is around our recruitment of foster carers and the digital recruitment campaign. We did have to halt that last year because of COVID, but we restarted it a couple of times last year. And actually, in the context of the broader COVID and what was going on in wider society, it's been very successful. We've had 245 inquiries, which is an increase of 72.5% on the previous year. That's the latest update, which isn't in this report, but I just wanted to share that with you. And again, given the wider challenges, actually we're on target to recruit an additional 15 mainstream foster carers by the end of the 2021-2022 financial year. So that is a positive, a real positive, given the challenges. And also there's obviously we're continuing to support our foster carers through appropriate training development as well. You'll see in the strategy there's reference to the gap and needs analysis in relation to residential care. I'm not going to go into detail here because that's covered in the addendum report, but just to say that we did extend our contract at Wenlock at the end of last year, and that will now run until the 7th of December this year, with then an option to extend for a further 6 months. But clearly our needs have changed, and I'll say a bit more about that further on in the next report. Then all children will actually good quality placements which meets their needs. That's just making sure that we're pulling together the right information around children to make sure we find the right placement. And that's the internal review that we've been doing, and that's also included our own decision-making process as well. You know, are we getting those right? Is there any duplication? Then the fifth objective is around children in care will be prepared for independence and healthy adulthood. Key activity there is around reviewing our post-18 accommodation provision, particularly given we have seen that increase of children coming into care, and we also have that cohort of 15 to 17-year-olds who will go on to leave care as well. Another key activity there is around improving the mental health and well-being support for children in care and care leavers, but also working with adult social care to improve the pathways when transitioning to adulthood. And we've made some developments around that in terms of preparation for adulthood, kind of strategy meeting that takes place on a regular basis where we can talk to adult services about some of our young people and their transition to being an adult as well. And then we'll review all commissioned placements, reference there to the sustainable model of track and challenge to ensure there's no drift. And again, we've had some significant successes in this already, where we've stepped down young people from residential care to semi-independent living accommodation, and also moving young people back to York. And that's been a real positive, and that's also resulted in some financial savings as well. But crucially, it's right for the young people, and they've been actively involved in those plans. And as part of that work, we've also been consulting with young people around developing our semi-independent living places, which is a particular gap that we've identified. You'll see in one of the reports reference to us converting Manlock into a 6-bedded semi-independent provision. That's something that we will, you know, again, that's part of our sufficiency. And then you'll see at the very end there is there's reference to an action plan as well. So before I go into the scorecard, are there any particular questions, queries about this report? As I say, I do appreciate it. The data is March last year, but I think it's important that the board was able to see this strategy.
Any questions, members? Councillor Heaton.
Thanks. Yeah, just a very quick one. Just on foster placements and use of foster placements. Do we have any sort of particular patterns available on the types of foster placements we have? Are there some that are oversupplied, some that are undersupplied, or is it general across the board?
We've got a real need to recruit more foster carers for teenagers in particular, but also foster carers who can take children who can step down from a residential placement into foster care when that's the right time for them. but also can take some sibling groups as well. So it's more complex children generally, but it tends to be the teenage age group that we struggle with. And if we could find foster carers who we could step down from a residential placement, that would be key for us, really.
So when we go again on recruitment, obviously we've had some success with the recruitment. When we go again on it,
yes,
that'll be a key area to focus on then.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. And actually, what we're also doing is talking to and working with our foster carers about upskilling them to be able to take some of these more challenging placements as well. So that's another key piece of work that we're doing, and they are keen to do that. So that's a positive as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, can I just say thank you for this? A lot of work is obviously going on and a lot's gone into the report, and it's very welcome. So thank you for all of that. Just looking at the action plan there and things there, I think it's just some comments to start with. I think it's absolutely right, the family group conferencing approach and developing that capacity for those that are on the edge of care. So that's clearly something that's welcome there in an action plan, I would think. I also would like to hear more about the adolescent strategy as we move on. As you've said, we will hear more about that. I think it's great, as you've said yourself, that 245 inquiries in the foster care field. I mean, that is surprising, I would have thought, in the current climate, but that is good. And we've always known, I suppose, that foster carers, for those that can support those with the most complex needs, are hard to get, really. I know we had an issue sort of 2 years ago around allowances for foster carers. For those that take on children or young people like that, it's more of a commitment to their whole life, maybe, in terms of not being able to go out to work or whatever. But yeah, so I can see that recruiting in there, it would be difficult, really. But the question, I suppose, really is, and it's the same for all young people almost at the moment, is the bullet point where it talks about improved mental health and emotional wellbeing support for children in care and care leavers. That's an action going forward. And I know you've touched on it and all you've said, so I don't know whether you want to add any more there about how that might happen. But yeah, it's clearly welcome, and it's clearly an issue for all young people, but specifically the ones that we're talking about here. So thank you anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Patrick. Any more on item 6, Simon?
No, I just wanted to, obviously within the papers is the Children in Care Strategic Partnership Scoreboard. And I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but I think it's just wanted to make sure that you can see it, and they are the main indicators that relate to children in care and care leavers. You'll see that there are 14 indicators, and they basically, you see on the scorecard that it does come previous years, so 2017-18, 2018-19, and then 2019-20. And then in the 2020-21 kind of financial year, you can see that it's broken down into quarters, and some information isn't available until certain points of the year. But it is, it's I think it's important you see it. I think it's picking up really on Amanda's point about the young person scorecard. I think there are some things missing from this which I think you would benefit from those. So, for instance, thinking about a breakdown of placement types, so numbers in foster care, but also in residential placements, semi-independent placements, the age ranges of children in care. I think maybe some more information around pathway team and the numbers of young people in touch with, and maybe around pathway plans, and potentially some more information around adoption as well. So I do think there's some new information that you would benefit from, which we are kind of going away and looking at now, inviting you. But I also think it kind of fits with the manager's food for thought about if we're going to add to a scorecard, thinking about what that would be in terms of a young person scorecard as well. So I just wanted to kind of introduce it to you, but also raise those points as well, actually. I mean, the dental check, for instance, you can see that's gone down, and that's a national issue. It's not just a local issue. I just wanted to reassure you that we're liaising closely with our health colleagues. We are making sure that all children in care, and that foster carers, placement providers, social workers are contacting those providers and making sure that young people are on a waiting list, if there is a waiting list, or if actually it's a real pressing need, that they are accessing the community dental service as well. So we're keeping a track of young people and presenting that to our senior management team meeting and to our performance meeting, so that we are, really on top of making sure that while there's a national issue, that actually we are really pushing for our children in care to have dental checks. And we are seeing those figures going up actually, so that work is starting to pay off, but it will just take a little bit of time. I just kind of wanted to highlight that, really.
Thank you, Simon. Any more questions on item 6, members? Thank you. So we'll move on to items 7 and 8. And Amanda, you wanted to?
I think, Chair, given the nature of the reports that we've got before us in items 7 and 8, we are talking about small numbers of children on these items, and in order for the board to have a full discussion, I would like to request that we go into private session so that we're not in danger of putting any personal details of any young people in the public domain.
Are we agreed, members? Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. Can you do that, Lawrence? Thank you very much. I think if you had hands up, you need to put them up again. Sophie, you were going to come in.
Councillor Orrell, I want to just suggest perhaps that you may want an update around children's dental issues, particularly given some of the things we've talked about this evening, and an assurance really, but we could also tie that into an update on health assessments. We could invite colleagues, if you agree, Councillor Orrell, from our health to come to talk to us about the work that's been done around that. I think it's a challenge, and I think you'll want to hear what work's been done to address it.
Yep, thank you, Sophie. Councillor Fitzpatrick?
Yes, just to say, really, I suppose going forward over the next 3 meetings, in the light of changes we might be going to make to the composition, etc., we might not want to think too far ahead, really. I think maybe just the next meeting, possibly. I don't know what others feel on that.
So can I just put a caveat around the dates of the meeting as well? So obviously the outcome of the High Court judicial review has been issued today, so the judgment has been given today, which is a return to physical meetings and face-to-face meetings. There is no potential or scope for remote meetings, etc. So in terms that impacts the date rather than how the meeting takes place, because we just have to review the calendar because of pressures of many other meetings and meeting room space, etc. So I just wanted to put a caveat in that the date may change, but that will be subject to sort of consultation on arrangements and the corporate calendar that will be determined by annual council.
Thank you, Jenny. I would hope that for future meetings we'll be getting young children to suggest items as well. But Amanda, you wanted to come in.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. I wonder if what makes sense is for us to have a joint meeting with Show Me I Matter and Show Me I Still Matter around what would they like to see on the agenda for the next few meetings.
Happy with that, members? Yeah. I think that's good agreement, Amanda. So with what Jenny said about future meetings, I think we'll have to incorporate that into how we move the next meeting forward.
Can I come back in? What we normally do is Show Me I Matter and Show Me I Still Matter invite us to a decision makers meeting. Now, presumably that's not a formally constituted local authority meeting. It's their meeting that they invite us to. So I'm looking at Janie when I'm saying this, I'm thinking as I'm talking, but presumably that isn't covered by the judgment. So that can still be a virtual meeting. Because it can. It's a person's meeting that they can invite us to. So maybe that's the way of doing that agenda setting, because we can do that like this, Nikki, if you've got a meeting coming up that young people would happily invite us along to.
Absolutely, yes. So the next sort of quarterly meeting that they have isn't until July. But that said, I think that obviously the May meeting is very soon, and I think we've got a set agenda. But we could either look at the meeting at the beginning of June, or we could go back to I Still Matter and Show Me That I Matter and ask them if they would like to put in an additional meeting specifically to look at this topic. That might be a way forward. I could put those two options to them if members are happy.
Thanks. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yes, and can we also be, to go back to what we have been talking about the changing nature of meetings or whatever, I want to thank Lawrence for tonight for the webcamming, and also Louise from Democratic Services, because parts of the conversation I've been having behind the scenes with the head of Democratic Services and also with Janie has specifically been around this, and we clearly have had confusion tonight. So can that be absolutely clear, what the role of Democratic Services will be in terms of, or the expectation in terms of servicing the new kind of meeting, etc. I think it's quite important for them to know that, and for us as elected members to know that as well, really. So I'm just assuming all that will be sorted out before this next meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair, the housekeeping. Yes, Chair, the housekeeping will be sorted out. Just obviously there is a lot going on at the minute. There is an awful lot of arrangements that now need to be considered. So yes, that will be formulated. The housekeeping will be sorted out by the time you meet again. So yes.
Thank you. I don't have any urgent business, so thank you all for attending this evening. It's been an interesting meeting in a variety of ways, but thank you very much, and we'll see you
Chair,
next time.
can I just say to Amanda and Sophie as well, despite my sort of disgruntled tone about a few things, I really do appreciate the amount of work you're doing. It's a really difficult time, and the work that you're doing, I think, and the authority in general is excellent. So just well done.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.